Good morning and welcome to Inside the FLX presented by FL1 News. It's Thursday, January 24th, and today we tackle education. We're talking about the Walden Project and the impact it's having on youth here in the Finger Lakes. My guests this hour are Andy Webster, founder and unit project coordinator at Walden NY, and Janean Shedd, who serves as instructor and service learning coordinator at Walden, which is located right here in the Finger Lakes. The curriculum is based around students finding answers to three simple questions. What is their relationship to themselves? What is their relationship to their culture? And what is their relationship to nature? Before we get to that conversation, though, a brief message from today's show sponsors, Midday, Miras, and Ricky, the Finger Lakes personal injury attorneys. With offices in Seneca Falls and Geneva, they are here to serve you. Stay tuned, and thanks for listening to Inside the FLX. Inside the FLX and other programming on FingerLakes1.com is made possible by local sponsors supporting local reporting. Learn more about advertising on Finger Lakes One by clicking on the Advertise button at the bottom of our homepage.
I was severely injured. I was on a ventilator. My husband was scared and he just went for the nearest number that he had heard advertised over and over and figured they're the best, they know what they're doing. I think that's the typical reaction, but unfortunately it wasn't the right one. And I'm thankful that we learned that early on in the process. He decided to look for someone locally who would give us a little more personalized attention. And when we met Steve and talked with him, we knew that we had found that person. If you want to feel like you have an attorney who's in your corner, who's going to listen to you, who's going to endeavor to understand you, give Steve a call. I really felt like everyone at Midday, Miras, and Ricky really cared.
For a law firm that cares about you, contact Midday, Miras, and Ricky at 315-568-0911. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome.
So thank you guys for stopping in today. Obviously, you've battled the elements to get here for this conversation. Super grateful for you guys making the time. First things first, what is the Walden Project and how did this sort of come to be here in the Finger Lakes?
Well, the Walden Project is an outdoor program for high school students. It's 5 days a week, and the idea is that students study the world through the lens of Henry David Thoreau. So Henry David Thoreau went off famously to Walden Pond to sort of figure out who he was and what was important in life. And in our program, students spend a whole year trying to answer the same three questions that Thoreau answered in his sojourn, which is, what is my relationship to myself? What is my relationship to my culture? And what is my relationship to the natural world? So this program started 19 years ago in Vermont. I first heard about it back in 2005, and I was taken away by, it seemed like exactly the kind of educational experience that I wanted to get involved in. I kind of held on to this as a dream for a long time, and then finally last year we decided we were going to make it happen.
And how difficult was that sort of, so you have the idea, and to get from point A, where it is just that idea, all the way to point Z, where you're actually doing it, all of that in between, how much of a struggle was that part of it?
Well, it was kind of scary in terms of starting off, I guess, asking around. You know, first off, several years ago, I started shopping this idea around to several high schools, and it seemed like it was kind of dead-ending because we don't do anything with standardized tests, and it's a pretty different kind of program because we're always, it's not standardized, which is how most education is structured. We're having a personal experience for every student who's there. And so at first it was kind of hard to get anyone to be able to resonate with that, but as a teacher I knew that there was a lot of students who are not, some schools might say they're slipping through the cracks. They are really intelligent students, they are curious, they want to be learning, and they're just, the standardized thing is not working for them. So I had a feeling that if we gave it a shot that we could get some students, and so yeah, kind of took a leap of faith, and we got 10 students to sign up.
And I guess the natural question for folks who might be listening to it, obviously we're going to talk a little bit about what the program physically looks like, so what actually happens in the program, but also Is there any particular group of people, or is there any particular type of student that you guys sort of see as an ideal fit for this kind of program, or just out of anyone who's interested, or what are sort of some of the qualifications of the folks who tend to be most interested, most suited for this kind of program?
We get a lot of students that are tired of being told what to do and how to do it, and they're looking for more independence and freedom within their education. Our students are intrinsically motivated on some level, and our goal is to really help them develop that and find confidence and courage within that. And so the students we have to be kind of self-starters and ready to be open to communication. Our school is based largely on philosophical conversations around the fire, and if nobody says anything, you don't talk about anything, you don't get anywhere. And so our students are ones that are ready to open up and willing to voice their thoughts on the world and what's going on. And a lot of them are students that were slipping through the cracks in their school, whether it was a personality clash or an academic thing. Some of them didn't feel like they were being pushed enough, and so they took themselves out to push themselves further.
How big a deal is a program like this, especially given the sort of crossroads that education K through 12 is at right now? A lot of changes, a lot of people unhappy with the way the system works, or who is sort of slipping through the cracks, like you guys are saying. Why is this such an opportunity for people around here?
Well, I mean, going back to Henry David Thoreau, I think the reason that he's an important lens is that he went off to Walden Pond shortly after his brother died, and a lot of what he writes about is waking up to life and kind of waking back up. And I think at his era, which was the mid 1800s, what he was noticing was a world that was going faster and faster in the direction of new inventions like the railroad and the telegraph. And he saw society basically becoming more disconnected from what's really important in life, the things that sustain you and make you happy. And I think that the parallels are pretty obvious today to me, that we see an extreme amount of disconnection between people, where on one hand you can very quickly speak to somebody on the other side of the world, but as Thoreau would point out, just because you can talk to someone across the ocean doesn't mean you have something interesting to say. So I think that where we have this factory model school system where everybody's experience is exactly the same, we're trying to create something that's really individualized, and it's I think everybody could benefit from taking a year to step back from the rat race and kind of think about what's really important, what direction you're going in life, what makes you happy, and what's really sustaining you.
So how does the program work? I guess that is the probably the most obvious question. Obviously, a lot of noise all around, especially for those kids who are juniors, seniors, maybe looking at college, maybe looking at community college. What does the process look like for actually going through the Walden Project?
Well, 3 days a week we're outside. Our classroom space is a fire pit that's outside of an old homestead cabin up at the Cummings Nature Center. And so we hike up from the parking lot, we get ourselves ready, fire gets built, water gets put over the fire for tea, and we crack open Walden. And we'll read a passage and talk philosophy and historical context and current social events and current world events that are really scarily similar and applicable to what was going on there. And then typical afternoons we do a variety of workshops. Some of them are paper pencil type things. We do a lot of systems thinking, which are logical loop systems. We do a lot of hands-on. So our unit on self-reliance, our workshops were garden building and deer hide skinning and spoon making, bowl making, pottery making, hiking, as hands-on as possible. Our last unit, being civil disobedience, it was a lot more philosophical conversation. But that's our outside days. 1 day a week we're inside. Every student has a self-selected research project, something that resonates with them. And one student studied what it is to be happy. Somebody else studied edible wilds. We have a student who's choosing to apply for college, and her application and the process that's going into that's their unit project, so that they get as much out of that as they can. And then 1 day a week they do service work. And again, it's anything that they resonate with. So animal work, tree saving work, somebody is building a wood canvas canoe, somebody was teaching English to refugees up in Rochester. Something, as long as it's meaningful, they're going to get more out of that, we feel like, than they will out of a traditional paper pencil academic experience.
And it sounds like you're describing, in some ways, what education might have been 30, 40, 50 years ago in the traditional system. How much of it is just turning back, how much of what you guys are doing is just turning back the clock and sort of going back to the roots of what education, to a lot of folks, was supposed to be about to begin with?
That's a great question. I think that, when I was in high school, when I graduated, to date myself, we didn't have any standardized tests in Massachusetts, at least nothing that was high stakes that was tied to your graduation. So when I became a teacher in New York State, this was a whole new way of looking at things. So in some ways, we are kind of going back to a time when it wasn't quite as standardized. It's, discretion is given more to the teachers. So, Janean and I can look at a situation and sort of figure out what's best for the student that's sitting in front of me, and not being bound to, this is what the system says we have to do. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, I think that it does kind of go back in that way. But in another sense, I think that there's been a whole movement that's been going on right now to try to rekindle young people, especially with nature. So you see, a lot of these forest school programs are popping up everywhere, and people are talking about terms like nature deficit disorder, really recognizing that a lot of youth today have so little opportunity to go outside and play, and I think that we're also part of that movement that's just trying to allow students to just reconnect with nature, to feel the cold, to and just kind of get back to their own basic needs. When you feel cold, you build a fire. Mm-hmm. When you want some food, we'll throw it on a skillet on the fire and warm it up. And so it's just trying to have students learn how to connect with the forces that they need to sustain themselves.
Has that been the biggest loss in the digital era that we are now planted in, especially for the generation now that's growing up, and I can't even include myself in this category, that they don't know a world without cell phones and computers?
I think connection is the thing that we've lost the most. Like Andy was saying earlier, people don't know how to talk to each other face to face, but you can do it real fast through text. Mm-hmm. And even with our students who came knowing that it was going to probably be a screen-free environment, and one of them showed up for school right after the Christmas vacation and was like, "Hey, Janean, I was doing good with my phone before. I've slipped. Can you please take it away from me?" And that way I could tell somebody, "Oh, I couldn't answer you. My teacher took my phone." And to me, that was huge, Mm-hmm. This is a 16-year-old kid that is looking for a way out of that environment because he recognizes how important it is to be here. And I think that part of that connection that we've lost is connection with ourselves also. We've seen there's a trend of people that are graduating high school and also college and have no idea what they want to do, but it's because nobody's ever let them think about it and figure it out for themselves. And so once they have all this freedom to figure out what it is they want, they don't know how to start. Mm-hmm. And so I guess part of our hope is giving them the space to think about those things that they want, and then holding them accountable to fulfill those. For 6 weeks at a time, pick something, study it. If you hate it, don't study it again. Do something different. Mm-hmm. But in that way, they're figuring out their place in the world and how they relate to the people around them a lot more intimately than I think our traditional school settings are allowing us to do.
And I think that I would add that it's about providing an alternative that right now, like in a traditional classroom, if you were to go into most public high schools right now, just about everybody's going to have a Google Chromebook, like every single student. And a student going from one 40-minute period to the next is going to be in front of a screen almost the entire day, whether it's a smartboard or a computer. Now, I think that that's an extremely powerful medium. I think that it's amazing what you can do with that. And I'm not trying to say that it's a negative thing outright, but I think that if that's the only thing, the only way that the students are experiencing the world, then I think that they benefit from having a variety of ways of learning. So, we have a chalkboard in the woods, and a lot of what we're doing is experiential learning. And I think, again, it's just the opposite of one size fits all.
And it seems to sort of go back to, and as you guys are talking about this, I'm thinking about, the folks are in their 30s, 40s, they have young kids, 6 to, say, 10, 12 years old. Sometimes I look at their schedules or hear the parents talk about their schedules, and it's like they have a busier day than I do, and I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. And so what part of this is like putting a little bit of choice into that structure that it seems a lot of folks are trying to bake into kids at a very, very young age, and sort of getting people back to their roots by the time they are 16, 17, 18?
Yeah, I mean, I think having been on the other side of that and, in working in the school system and seeing how a lot of the decisions are made, it's not necessarily made with what even research suggests is best for kids. So, for example, research, our day starts at 9:30. Research suggests that a lot of students are not getting enough sleep. I think that research also suggests that the amount of homework that a lot of high school students are given is just cutting into their family time with their parents, and it's sort of and it adds a lot of stress to their household. So I think a lot of people know these things, but even knowing that, they just feel like their hands are tied because they're part of the larger system with its rules. So for us, we kind of relish in the fact that we're able to, we still have accountability. We try to encourage everybody to follow through with the projects that they're working on, but I feel like we've been able to escape the typical coercive ways that people are kind of manipulated into going to school and doing what they're supposed to do, under threat of punishment.
So it honestly sounds like what you guys are doing with Walden seems pretty similar to what a college experience is actually like, with the choice and how they're sort of approaching it. As far as traditional education goes, do you see a scenario where the kinds of things that you guys are doing are more baked into that system eventually?
Which things? Like the alternative, the more natural, the more identifying with self and sort of educating, but going back to the basics. Will we ever get to a point, do you think, where traditional education actually embodies some of that?
I hope so, and I hope that eventually there is a trend where there can be a smaller student-teacher ratio within the classrooms, because I think that's one of the things that really is helping us to be able to do this individualized thing. There's always going to be pressure for standardization, I think, and I think there's always going to be a push for students to do this or do that particular thing. But having worked in a public school, some teachers are trying to make that choice available and are trying to set it up almost Montessori style, in which you have different options of things that you can do. The expectation is you do all of them at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think as other alternative education programs start evolving, traditional schools are going to start utilizing more of those methods in order to make sure that they're getting the same experience, or as close to the same experience as what our students are trying to also grab onto.
So the 3 questions that the program is based around, let's talk a little bit about those. Walk us through what each of them means and what sort of the goal is of each, or what the student should get out of each one as they go through the process.
Well, the first question is, what is my relationship to myself? And again, I think it sort of comes back to that Thoreau idea of waking up. And I think that a lot of us, Thoreau's famous quote is that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I think that a lot of people from a very young age are so built into this idea of everything that they have to do, that little voice inside of them that is your inspiration, it's your curiosity, and it's your intrinsic motivation, that is, in a lot of ways, people have to put their heads down and ignore that voice and just kind of go about their business. And I think that again, I mean, there's times in your life maybe when that's a necessity, if that's your job, and there's times when that's a useful thing to, I guess, be able to do that. But I feel sad to me that for many people, even as kids, that they, from the moment that they are entering that system, that they have to start ignoring that voice, and getting into the have-tos instead of the listening to who they are. And so, yeah, again, this is about waking up to that thing that's always been there, but a lot of us have kind of learned how to silence.
And question number 2?
How do I relate to the natural world? I think the easy answer is to say that we're outside 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. And so they're in the elements, and they're learning how they relate to the summer heat versus the winter cold, and how they relate to the fire and to the water that they remembered or forgot to bring, and now they have to go and get it from a couple hundred yards away. But I think the understanding of the natural world is just as important and just as vital. Not just the vicarious experience, and not just the sitting there and recognizing things as they shift around them, but we've been able to dive really deeply into some of the interconnectivity in the natural world. We had a couple of students that every mushroom that we saw when we were hiking, we stopped because they wanted to understand what was happening and how they were all so varied. And almost everybody has an app on their phone, people who have smartphones, that will help them identify different things that are out there. Mm-hmm. But also finding a balance between because our society we don't live in caves right now, and we don't have stick homes, and we are more removed from the natural world. So one of our students decided to go no impact for his unit project, but he still had to get in a car to get to school. We had somebody else, she comes from about an hour away. And so just figuring out where as human beings we fit into the balance between the natural world and the societies that we have. And recognizing that as a species, we deserve to have food, water, shelter. But where do you draw that line so that the rest of the world can also live simultaneously in a way that doesn't negatively impact anybody?
Is this building some mindfulness into young people? Is just sort of being aware, if nothing else, about what's going on around them?
Yeah, and so part of what Janine was saying too is that a lot of the way that we approach learning, even nature identification stuff, is narrowing things down to identify what it is. And when I lead nature walks and stuff, a lot of people will ask me, what's this, and they just want to stop at the name of what each thing is. And what we're encouraging students to do, what I always say is that the name is the least important part of what that organism is. And if you're I think what we're doing is not repeatable in a classroom setting, because if you're outside every day, you're going to have a true relationship with the trees and the environment that's around you, and even if you don't know the names of what each species is, you're interacting with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that experiential form of education is really irreplaceable.
And the last question, I believe, how one relates to their culture. How does that one fit into what you guys are doing?
Yeah. In the beginning of the year, I think it was one of our first sessions, we asked the students if you were to think about your own values, what's important to you, and then you think about your life, what percentage of the choices that you make in your life actually line up to the values? So, for example, if you feel that you would never ask a young child to make your sneakers, mm-hmm. You would never actually make that choice and ask somebody to do that for you, and you have ethical questions about things like sweatshop labor, but how many things do you own that were made in a sweatshop? And so we had everybody kind of reflect on their own, how well that their life aligns with their values. And I think even if you ask most adults, I think I've maybe never met somebody who is 100%. I think we all have to make compromises. So I think that if that's kind of the essence of that question is how do we interact with each other, and how do we find a way to make it so that the life that we're living is more closely aligned with our values, so that we aren't, in terms of culture, so that we aren't oppressing other people.
And on a tangible level, at Walden, we try to invite kind of anybody who wants to come and share their wealth of information with our students. And so they're meeting their community and they're telling us what's important to them so that we can bring those people in. And then even more than that, their service work. Andy and I have both done, both given the opportunity to do a lot of service work. And we found that the ability to give back and to share what you have also magnifies your experience as a whole. And so how do I relate to my culture? We've been trying to help them see that every piece of service work that they do is rippling outwards. We had a student who spent time organizing a closet at the hospice house in Naples, and now they've had like 7 residents at this point, and everybody who's worked there now has access to everything that was in the closet, which was just an abomination before because no one had had the time to do it.
Right.
And he felt like he didn't do anything useful. You just opened this space that made it so that families can come in and out of there a lot easier. Just every little piece of what they're doing, and I think they're getting it. A lot of debriefing to do still, but I think it's starting to make sense that you cannot step outside of your culture. Even if you choose to go and be a hermit in the woods, you are still in the woods and you are still surrounded by people and surrounded by society. You are just choosing to interact with it in a different way.
And I think what you were saying too is about the debrief comment, that a lot of times, well, I love the expression invisible teaching, that a lot of times when students are learning about stuff, they aren't necessarily aware that we are in history class or we are in English class. It's a completely integrated curriculum. We don't announce that we're covering one topic or another. And a lot of times the experience is something they're going to process later. So if they were, again, to use the example of working in nature, if you're splitting a piece of firewood and you noticed that it broke in a weird way, and then you split a different kind of piece and it broke in a different way, that's going to be an experiential memory that you're going to remember, and then later on you might process more information that then makes that experience much richer. But it's definitely something that takes time.
So what has the reception been like within the community, within the Finger Lakes, from students? Then the second half of that question would also be, what does success look like at the end of a student's journey with Walden? What does that look like?
People have been outstandingly welcoming, and coming into this community, I moved in specifically to help teach at the Walden Project. And as soon as people hear that I'm here for Walden, it's all of a sudden, Walden's so cool. It's the best thing that's happened to our community. I'm so glad this is here. I'm so glad this is an opportunity. And our students have been on it as well. They, every break, well, why didn't break end sooner? Well, can we just come in anyway? Yeah. Well, can we stay after school today? It's like, well, we can't. We have things to do. Yeah. But, and their families also have just been nothing but supportive. And, if one family had access to firewood and we needed a little bit extra at Walden, and so the firewood showed up, and somebody else had some warm clothing, and a couple of our students didn't have as much warmth as they needed, and so that showed up one day as well. And I feel like, we have one student coming from Hammondsport, we had a student coming from Greece, and kind of everywhere in between. Yeah.
And the community has been incredibly supportive of this. One of the challenges that we've had so far is in our first year, we're unaccredited. So this program in Vermont, they've been doing this for 19 years, and they're well established. They've been recognized by NPR News and Huffington Post and a whole bunch of others. And we don't have that kind of reputation. So we have a lot of people who have said that they would like to send their kids to something like this, but they want to make sure that their kids can also graduate. So in terms of success, I would love to talk more about what success might look to a student, but in terms of our program, one of our goals for next year is to be accredited. We're in that process, and once we have that in year 2, it should be a much easier transition for a student to be able to be in public school, and just the same way that students might do a study abroad program, they can go down the street to Cumming Nature Center and do our program for a year. What they found at the program in Vermont at this particular school, the average graduation to college rate is 54%. And students who do the Walden Project, many of whom said they would have otherwise dropped out. These are not like accelerated students, but their high school to college rate has been near 100% for 19 years. So, and the reason is that they're they're not in the woods teaching calculus, but they are allowing students to just kind of ask those questions and figure out who they are and what their direction is. And I think because we don't do that enough in schools. I just think it's essential for, yeah.
So is it preparing students for what comes next, or what are the elements at play that really, when a student exits Walden, they have succeeded in the mission you guys have attempted to instill in them?
I think a student has succeeded if they leave our program feeling more confident in who they are and how they connect to the natural world and to their culture, which sounds really redundant, but honestly, I think if they can leave with a feeling of self-worth, because a lot of them have shown up without any and are slowly, that's one of my favorite things to see, is to see them start coming around and figuring out that they do have something to add. A feeling of self-worth, some intrinsic motivation, so wherever they go, if it's to a traditional school setting or college, wherever they're going, and they get hit with this homework, like, why am I doing this? There is no point to this, except for their own intrinsic motivation that says, I should do this because it will help me later. If they can leave with that intrinsic motivation and a wealth of other knowledge, every student will compile a portfolio at the end of the year that has all of their unit projects and shows their growth from point A to point C. That portfolio, I think, is going to demonstrate a lot of their inner growth as well as their academic growth.
So as you guys have moved through the process, is there any particular story or incidents that stands out for you as something that's particularly memorable involving a student?
Yeah, it's funny, we were just talking about this on the way over here. There's been so many. I guess my favorite part of the day is when we first arrive in the morning. We go on this long walk up the hill. It feels like a long walk because it's uphill. But, we're probably walking for 7 or 8 minutes through the woods, and then we finally arrive up at our spot. So we have an outdoor classroom with a bunch of benches around the campfire, and it just feels like, I mean, compared to like a typical educational experience, it feels like the place is just humming with purpose. It feels like every student has something that they're working on. So some people are going and gathering firewood. Other people are going and getting hot water for tea, or water to put on the fire for tea. It just feels like everybody is invested, everybody has purpose, and I just love that. It's not so much one specific story, but it's something that happens every day where I'm like, this just feels so different than any other kind of educational experience I've had. Nobody's moping, nobody's feeling lethargic or apathetic. Everybody is just, you hear laughter through the woods with all these teenagers, and I just love that. It happens just about every day. I don't know if you have any stories that...
Yeah, I guess one of my favorites is from the very beginning of the year. We started with a 2-night, 3-day camp-out trip, and it was the end of the second day, I believe. We'd had a really intensive conversation around the fire, talking a lot about gender identity specifically. And so 3 of the students and I had a continuation of that conversation. Everybody went down towards the tents. We continued that conversation for another 10-15 minutes, and then we walked down the hill, and everybody was still outside. It was clear right above us, so we were stark watching, but there was heat lightning in the hills over, and everybody could have just gone to their tents and done their own thing, but they chose to stay. And they chose to be together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everybody who has come to this program really wants it to work, that's been really amazing as well.
So 2019, what does 2019 look like for you guys? And then when 2019 draws to a close, what will a successful 2019 have looked like?
Well, I guess a couple announcements we're going to make. One, we're going to post this up on the web soon. The number 2 question that we get asked about the Walden Project is, can adults do it? So everybody's parents see how much fun their kids are having, and they all want to participate. So we've decided one thing that's going to be happening, we'll put the dates up on the website soon. We are going to do a couple weekend workshops for adults. And it'll be, pretty similar, sitting around a campfire talking philosophy and then having a lot of, outdoor experiences. But it seems like a lot of people, not just teenagers, are hungry for this. We're also talking about offering a summer semester, which, again, we'll put the dates up, but it'll be about 3.5 weeks in July this summer. And then for the coming school year, our program is designed especially for students who are 16 to 19 years old. Sometimes younger students have asked to be able to be part of it, and we've said, if you can handle the independence of, picking your own research project, and we sit around and we talk, so if you, if those are things that are appealing to you and you feel like you're mature enough for that, we have let some younger students, participate. But we are open for enrollment, so we're hoping that more students either from a public school setting or a homeschool setting, and we also have gap year students who have finished high school but they're not exactly sure what they want to do for college. So anybody in that category is welcome to come and join us for the next year. This first year, I've been a teacher for about 10 years. This is by far the most amazing, exciting environment that I've ever been part of. And the learning that's happening is, I think, more meaningful than anything else that I've been part of as well. So yeah, I'm excited to just kind of do more of the same for next year.
Yeah, I guess that pretty much sums it up. Like, no matter where people are coming from, anybody, 16 to 19-ish, we would love to mix it up. I think that's part of what makes our program so strong. And having worked years in outdoor education, it's typically the students that have trouble sitting still that thrive in an outdoor education setting. And so I guess 2019, hopefully, we'll have an influx of humans that are feeling lost within a school setting and come and find Walden and find where they are meant to be.
And some of our students are coming from a place where school wasn't working for them. We also have a bunch of homeschool students who, for many of them, this is their first social learning experience. So for them, the independent side of things is something they've done all along, but to be able to learn in a group setting and be able to get to know their peers, and also all of the amazing learning that happens when you have a bunch of people dialoguing and going back and forth, pulling apart an idea. So we have people from that setting as well.
And then the timeline, what are some of the dates and deadlines that exist for folks who might be interested or their kids might be interested in what you guys are doing?
I believe last year, and I think we'll probably stick with the same one, we do offer financial aid for our program. We try to get everybody's financial aid applications in by June 30th so that we have enough time to be able to process everything and figure out who's going to be there for the coming year. We had some people who applied afterward, and it was a little bit of a scramble in the first year. So one of my hopes for this coming year is that we get more applications in sooner, because that makes it a lot easier for us. Basically every time there's been an obstacle, whether it's people with transportation issues or people who need us to be able to talk to their high school to make sure that they understand what it is that they're going to be doing on this experience, we've been able to overcome every obstacle that's come up so far. So we just encourage any parents who want to do this experience for their kids that just talk to us, and we will do our best to work with every obstacle that comes up.
I guess another deadline would be our second semester technically starts tomorrow. So if there's somebody that is wanting to jump in for the second half of the Walden year, we'd love to have applications within the next 2 weeks, ideally. Yeah,
we've got some cool stuff coming up. Starting, so we do 6 units through the year, kind of break them into 6-week chunks. So in Unit 4, which is starting tomorrow, we're going to be making maple syrup and learning about economics through that experience. Unit 5 is going to be doing a whole bunch of watershed management and monitoring, specifically on the Honey Oil Lake watershed, and we're going to look at some of the environmental issues that are going on there right now. And then our last unit is going to be a unit all about communication. So after this whole year worth of experience where students have had these powerful experiences we're going to talk about, how do you take those experiences and share what you've learned with the world?
All right. Well, I appreciate the time, guys. Obviously, a lot of exciting stuff going on with Walden, and we'll be looking for updates on how this year goes for you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Josh.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for making Inside the FLX a part of your week. That's all the time we have for today. New episodes air on Thursday and Sunday exclusively on FingerLakes1.com. Of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, rate and review the podcast. It helps new listeners find the program and ensures that local journalism continues to thrive here in the Finger Lakes. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay tuned to FL1 News for the latest and breaking news here in the Finger Lakes.